Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Dustin Hoffman.
Welcome into Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Russ Parker, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson will join us later on in the program. Let's run down some of the headlines we watched. Well, of course, the big one was E15 clearing its first hurdle for year-round authorization by passing the House. Riley Smith will be talking with Randy Feenstra later on in the program, but we also heard from the rest of Iowa's representatives in the House on the floor on Wednesday. We'll start off with 1st District Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meek.
Since 2011, the EPA has issued an emergency waiver to allow E15 to be sold during the summer months. That means Washington already recognizes that this policy makes sense. What we are doing today is removing an outdated prohibition and finally providing certainty for farmers, producers, retailers, and consumers year-round. E15, as an American-made domestic fuel that is homegrown, lowers gas prices, strengthens our energy independence, and supports rural communities across Iowa and our country. Nationwide E15 adoption would save drivers nearly $27 billion annually. But this debate is about much more than fuel. Agriculture is hurting right now. Input costs remain high through the Biden administration, commodity prices are down, and farm bankruptcies are rising. I've looked farmers in the eye as they've told me their family farms, their legacies, their community bank, their community implement dealer, not because they're failing, but because Washington keeps moving the goalpost. Year-round E15 provides the certainty farmers have been asking for. It would increase corn demand by 2.4 billion bushels, strengthens domestic energy production, and support more than 128,000 American jobs, and injects billions into rural economies, and saves Americans money. And let's clear up some misinformation being pushed about this bill. The legislation doesn't mandate E15. It simply gives retailers the option to sell it year-round. Again, it's removing an outdated prohibition. The fear-mongering and falsehoods being spread about this bill are coming at the expense of America's farmers, rural communities, and the American people. Farmers do not need more uncertainty. They need Congress to finally act and get out of the way. It's time to deliver permanent year-round E15. With that, I yield.
Next, we heard from 2nd District Representative Ashley Hinson.
This is a challenging time for our ag economy, and we should be using every single tool available to us to support farmers and our rural communities. And this bill does just that, driving new demand for American ag products and boosting our farm income by $13.8 billion. Year-round E15 would lower costs across the board for working families across the country, saving drivers up to 30 cents per gallon and reducing those prices along the supply chain. That's a savings of about $200 a year in fuel costs for the average family. Iowans, just for a stat here, have saved $126 million in the last decade by choosing E15 over E10. That's real savings. Full E15 adoption would also help to support 128,000 full-time jobs. So, after years of uncertainty, it is time for Congress to step up and provide this permanent solution. This is something I know I've been pushing for years. This is not a mandate. This is common sense regulation fixes focused right on the consumer. This is not a mandate. It's a market. It's a win-win-win, supporting homegrown energy, reducing reliance on foreign oil, and continuing to support America's producers who do the best thing, which is feeding and fueling the world. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this common sense bill, and I yield back.
And then finally, we heard from 3rd District Congressman Zach Nunn.
Today, we have the opportunity to save every American at the pump up to 50 cents per gallon. We know because we proved it right in my home state of Iowa. The value of year-wide, nationwide E15 is real money in the pockets of families, communities, and our supply chain nationwide. Today we get to choose. If we save every American family those dollars and put it back in their pocket to reinvest in their families when they fill up, or if we're going to continue to allow energy prices to strain families' budgets. Today, we get to choose between a fuel that is grown literally right here in the United States for energy independence, or if we continue to be reliant on foreign powers and adversaries and subsidizing their ability to get fuel to the rest of the world while America does the heavy lifting. And today, we get the chance to deliver for producers. Family farmers like the 87,000 small family farmers that are building that next generation of not only feeding our country, but fueling it. Our farmers work hard for our families. And today, We get to work hard for both families and farmers by putting this bill on the floor. We defeated backroom deals in D.C. to secure this vote that will bring down costs for American families. And now we have the chance today to finish that job. I would ask my friends on both sides of the aisle, this is an opportunity for affordability for families, certainty for producers, and American energy that grows right here in America. I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
That's going to do it for me in the news headlines. Now it's time for Russ Parker and his faith-based food for thought.
I was in the shop the other day working on a woodworking project and found myself doing something I've heard my whole life. Measure twice, cut once. It's one of those old sayings usually handed down by somebody with a tape measure hanging from their belt and a little sawdust on their boots. And there's a reason for it, for once you cut a board too short, there's really no putting it back together the same way again. A good measurement matters. It helps things fit like they're supposed to. Truth is, we spend a lot of our lives measuring things, don't we? We measure lumber and acres and rainfall totals. We measure fuel mileage, cattle weights, interest rates, and how much seed is left in the planter box. Parents mark growth charts on the walls for their kids, and doctors measure blood pressure. And schools measure grades, and athletes measure speed and strength. And sometimes if we're not careful, we start measuring people too. We measure success by bank accounts, accomplishments, titles, or followers on social media. And we measure worth by appearance or popularity. And we measure failures and mistakes and hold on to them probably longer than we should. And sometimes we even measure ourselves against everybody else and come up feeling short. But the phrase measure for measure shows up in the Bible a little different way. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, "For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." That verse kind of stops us in our tracks, doesn't it? Because suddenly the measuring tape isn't pointed outward anymore, it's pointed towards us. How much grace do we measure out to others? How much patience and forgiveness and compassion and understanding? Jesus reminds us that measurements we use in life matters. Harshness has a way of coming back harsh. Bitterness returns bitter. But mercy, kindness, and generosity have a way of multiplying too. Maybe that's why Jesus measured people differently than the world did. He saw value in fishermen and tax collectors, the brokenhearted, and those that the world had cast aside. He didn't measure by status or wealth or perfection. He measured by what you've heard me ask before. What is the condition of the heart? And thankfully for us, the cross is the proof that God's grace is not measured out in small portions. So maybe before we speak, judge, criticize, or condemn, we ought to remember the old shop lesson once again. Measure twice, cut once. Take a second look, offer a little grace, extend a little mercy, because in the end, the measure we give away may very well become the measure that we receive. Food for thought, I hope. This is Russ Parker. Have a blessed day.
Thanks, Russ, and that's going to do it for segment 1 of Weekend Ag Matters. Stay with us. Mark Magnuson will be right back.
Every county fair has that special person or family. They are there before the gates open and long after the lights go out, helping families with projects and pitching in wherever they're needed, never asking for recognition. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, along with Wyffels Hybrids, is honoring them with the Heart of the County Fair Award. 6 winners will be recognized locally and at the Iowa State Fair, with a plaque, cash prize, VIP passes, and food coupons. Don't delay. Nominations are due June 1st. Visit iowaagnet.com to nominate today.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's Mark Magnuson.
You're listening to Weekend Ag Matters, and here on the program today, we will hear from Russ Parker's recent conversation with the co-founder of Culver's, Craig Culver. Here's Russ with more.
Craig, let's just get started with some conversation here in terms of how where agriculture kind of fits, in your DNA.
Yeah, mom grew up in a dairy farm in central Wisconsin, a little town called Pickett. I don't know how many cows they had, maybe 25, 30, maybe. I don't really know, but occasionally my brother and I, we'd go there, and when mom and dad might take a little trip someplace, we'd go stay with Grandpa and Grandma on the dairy farm. And I'll never forget, my grandfather's a good old German guy, first generation German, couldn't speak English very well. But I remember getting on the tractor with him. He was driving, and I was hanging onto the driver's seat and standing on the back. And he took off, and I fell straight backwards. But yeah, so Mom grew up on the dairy farm, and my dad, my dad went to work for Wisconsin Dairies, which was a dairy cooperative, and Dad was what they call a field man, much like it's similar to Culver's with our field reps, as a matter of fact. My dad went out in the rural communities, in the rural areas, and if farms qualified, he'd put them on grade A, so they'd get more for their milk, and that was what my dad did until he decided to buy an A&W drive-in in 1961 in our hometown of Sauk City in Prairie du Sac, just north of Madison. And that was our entrance into the food service industry in 1961. And I have been in the food service industry ever since then. I'm 76. No, I'm not 76 yet. I will be in June. Why do you advance your age, huh? Why do you do that? But so I've been in the food service business for a long time, and as the story goes, I always swore I'd never stay in the food service business because it is too much like farming. You got to work too hard, too long hours, early in the morning, late at night, 7 days a week. That's what we do. But I'm so glad I stayed in this business. I love this business, and I love the creative food part of it, creating great food and stuff like that, making great food. But what I really like is the people aspect of what we do at Culver's. That's what makes and breaks any company or any organization, for that matter. It's about leading a great group of people and leading them, hopefully, to success, developing people along the way, creating future leaders. I was just talking to the FFA kids out there. That's what they do. That's a leadership program. That's not a farm program necessarily. It's a leadership program. It's teaching these young people how to become leaders. And, that's a responsibility of any leader as well, is teaching the people around you, and whether it's an organization or a business, teaching the people around you, mentoring the people around you, and helping develop the people around you to become better leaders.
I'm just thinking a little bit about how your life and maybe my life are pretty parallel. But at some point in time, we have this idea of maybe wisdom and being able to surround ourselves with good people. Would you kind of agree that that's been kind of part of your strategy?
Well, if it isn't part of the strategy, I'm a pretty dumb person. Saying that, as I, decided this was the industry I was going to grow up and create a real career, and as I started to advance in the industry, I looked back at my parents. Now, my mother grew up on a dairy farm, as I said. No college, made it through high school, okay. My father, no college. My father struggled in high school. My dad was hearing impaired, both ears. So he didn't always hear what, he thought or what he was supposed to hear. So school was a struggle for him. But he wasn't dumb by any means. He was as sharp as anybody was. So when I look back, as I started to grow my career, look back at what my parents had done earlier in life at different restaurants, resort that we owned, one of the things my parents were so good at was surrounding themselves with, yes, talented people, but more importantly, people that knew how to say please and thank you and my pleasure and mean it. It was genuine. That's what they were so good at. And, man, that's the kind of business I want to run, too. I want people that you genuinely care for and help them grow along the way. Mom and Dad were that. That's what they were best at.
So our parents are, when we look back and as we get older, boy, they sure do get a lot smarter.
I've said that many times. I have. And they sure did.
Yeah.
They sure do. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So let's maybe switch gears a little bit. A lot of us are familiar with some of the marketing that you do and bringing agriculture into the equation and the idea of family into the things that you're communicating. Let's talk a little bit about that, and particularly the agricultural part and how that kind of fits into your business equation.
The ag portion of our marketing program started, I lose track of the years, 20 plus years ago. And it happened to be, I was watching the Super Bowl game on that Sunday of Super Bowl Sunday. And Chrysler Motors was running an ad on the Super Bowl for their Ram trucks. And Paul Harvey was doing the advertising. And what is it? And God created a farmer. You remember that?
Yeah, sure do.
And I love that. I love that poem. I love Paul Harvey. That actually helped launch the Thank You Farmer campaign. And then I remember, do you remember when pork prices were down to pennies a pound?
They were letting them loose.
Yeah. Well, being who we are and growing up in rural Wisconsin and knowing how important the pork farmers are and all the farmers, we decided to do a little campaign for the pork farmers. And it was nothing crazy, but we selected a bunch of billboards along major highways. And this is how creative we were. The message was, eat more pork. That was the message. And it was closing in on Christmas time. And I'll tell you what, the beef farmers were upset with us. I'm not kidding you. I got calls from the beef farmers saying, what are you doing? We're here too, But it was, the pork farmers were in such dire straits that we did something. And then, so we got deeper and deeper, partnering with the ag community. And, we've got a bunch of barns out there that we painted blue. And Thank You Farmers. And FFA we're a strong sponsor of that. I'll talk a little bit about that on stage. We just know how important the ag community is to us as a restaurant business. We can't do anything without them. They're like I said earlier, they're my neighbors, they're my friends, they're our suppliers, and they're our customers at Culver's as well. So they are just terribly, terribly important.
Well, Craig, I sure have appreciated your time. It's been a great conversation, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah. Thank you. My pleasure.
So, again, I've been with Craig Culver, co-founder and chairman of the board of Culver's Restaurants, and thank you again for your time today.
That was Russ Parker with his conversation with the co-founder of Culver's, Craig Culver. Coming up next here on Weekend Ag Matters, Riley Smith will wrap up the show. You're listening to Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
In rural Iowa, you need reliable information. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network brings you ag-specific content like market trends, weather outlooks, and policy updates that matter to your operation, while your local station brings you community news and consistent updates on what is happening in your area. It's a partnership built for the challenges of rural life. Your farm, your local station, and your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters. Find us online at iowaagnet.com.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's Riley Smith.
On the phone right now with Iowa Congressman Randy Feenstra to discuss the House passage of year-round E15. And Congressman Feenstra, I know this has been a long battle, a long time coming, especially on your side. If you could first off tell us a bit about what all was included in this bill.
Yeah, Riley, I just want to say thanks for having me on Iowa Ag Radio. This is such a big day for the Iowa farmer and for families. You know, this is a year-round E15. It's RFS reform to dramatically help our farming community and to see everyone come together. So it started in February of this past year. We couldn't get anything done, and leadership said, hey, we're going to put you in charge and try to figure out a solution. So we put everybody in a room from biofuels to petroleum industry to corn growers to Farm Bureau, and we came with a solution, and the solution got passed yesterday. So I'm just so impressed that we got it done, and now we're working with the U.S. Senate to get it passed there and to get it to the president's desk.
So from your point of view, are you feeling like this will make it to the president's desk, hopefully in the state that it's in, or are we feeling like the Senate will maybe try to make some changes to it?
I tell you what, I'm really excited. So President Trump has been very engaged in the process. Obviously, he was in Iowa a year ago and said how important E15 is, and he said he'd sign it if it gets to his desk. We had the vice president in town 3 weeks ago. He said how important E15 was, and same with the USDA Secretary Rollins. The great thing that this bill got passed bipartisanly. So there was 122 Republicans and 95 Democrats. This bodes really well in the Senate. And talking with Senate leadership, they were really excited about those numbers to see that. They thought they could get it passed. Again, it's mutually beneficial for all stakeholders, and I don't think it can be changed. We went through all the numerations, all the issues, and this was sort of the balance. This is sort of the balance of what you can do with all the groups involved, all the stakeholders. So I believe it stays the same. It gets passed, and the president will sign it. So I'm looking forward to that happening.
And then I know you and I have talked before about year-round E15 kind of unleashing ethanol production here in the United States because, yes, over the past several years, we have had basically year-round access with those moratoriums, but that does mean that those ethanol producers have to be cautious on how much they're producing because they never know if they're going to have that E15 production. So having that year-round could really increase what we're seeing, right?
Absolutely. This creates certainty. And you think about Iowa is literally the ethanol capital of the world. And this will increase corn demand by about 2.4 billion bushels. It'll create, extra profits for farm income by 13.8 billion. I mean, this is game-changing stuff. I mean, this will unleash domestic energy in our country like we've never seen before. So we don't have to buy from our adversaries. And it's all going to happen in Iowa. And I always promise that we will be the most business and ag-friendly state in the country. That's my vision. It starts with this. It starts with the E15 year-round and making sure that our farmers have markets and that we can lower the gas price at the pump.
And I know, you mentioned earlier of this being a battle, all through the system, but you specifically have been pushing for this for quite some time, so I bet it feels nice to finally see it come through.
It is, and I applaud leadership to understand how important Iowa is, and from myself and the delegation all working collaboratively to get it done. I mean, you think about this. A year ago, we passed the largest tax reduction in U.S. history that helped the American farmer, helped the Iowa farmer with, no death tax and so many other provisions. 3 weeks ago, we passed the Farm Bill that had so many great provisions, obviously, for our farming community, and now we passed E15. So we are delivering results here for Iowans, and that's exciting to see, and hopefully they can see it in their pockets as we move forward.
And is there anything else from your office? You had mentioned, we saw the Farm Bill recently with the House passage of E15 as well. There's been a lot of progress on agricultural legislation. Anything else from your office that farmers here in Iowa can look forward to seeing soon?
Well, I'll just tell you this. This is how you take Iowa to new heights, is that you continue to think of how you can grow our agricultural economy. We know that the farm economy is the backbone to our state. And the Farm Bill, we had 15 legislative priorities in there that got done, now E15. There's a lot of other things that we need to do to continue to help the Iowa farmer, lowering fertilizer prices, lowering input costs. getting more trade. Obviously, we have President Trump in China right now. We're hoping there's good outcomes there for our soybeans. This is all, and our hogs. So this is all on the table right now, and we're advocating and working with the administration on. Again, we will make sure that Iowa becomes the most business and ag-friendly state in the country. That is my vision. That is my goal, and I will drive this at our state.
All right, Congressman Feenstra, thank you so much for your time today. For anybody who wants to stay in touch with everything going on in your office, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can go to feasterforgovernor.com. Riley, it's always great to be on Iowa Ag Radio. Thank you so much.
That again was Iowa Congressman Randy Feenstra, and we look forward to seeing the progress of year-round E15 as it moves through the Senate and hopefully eventually becomes signed into law. That's it for today's episode of Weekend Ag Matters. Thanks again for tuning in. You can listen to this episode and more by going to the podcast tab on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network website at iowaagnet.com. For Russ Parker, Mark Magnuson, and Dustin Huffman, I'm Riley Smith, wishing you a great rest of your weekend. Join us again next week for more Weekend Ag Matters.